And we're live. Welcome, everybody. Of course, my name is Castaldo, and this is the Space Water Podcast, where we dive into the sound of the light. We're here live on a Sunday this time with Gary Wayne. We usually do Saturdays, but it's a Sunday this time. The Sunday with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Gary Wayne from Genesis 6 Conspiracy.com. Everybody, check out his book series by the same name, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, where he talks about the races of giants that are enslaving humanity and the various bloodlines related. As if you haven't heard of Gary Wayne, you are in for a treat today. We are going to be talking about some of the giant tribes that have walked the earth, from the frozen wastelands of Siberian wilderness to the Brazilian jungles to the volcanic regions. We got giants who've walked the earth in those days and afterwards, and there's no better man in the world to have on to discuss this than Mr. Gary Wayne from Genesis 6 Conspiracy.com. Gary, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming back on the Space Water Podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me back and happy to be here. And yes, doing a Sunday show. So it's a nice little change of pace. But no matter what the day, we tend to get into things that other people do not. So should be an interesting discussion.
Should be a very interesting discussion. Yes, I really agree. And I look forward to your talks more than anyone, and I really cherish the time that we have together and that we spend together on here, and it's really a treat to have you on. Once again, everybody, it's Genesis6Conspiracy.com, and we're sponsored today by the MysticalSpiralStore.com. So, Gary, before we get into the different tribes of giants that walk to Earth and how it's really making our world into what the Sanskrit they call an asuric force, greed, materialism, power, domination, all of this rules the consciousness of the planet related to this. We mentioned before the show, Gary and I were talking a little bit about the work of Rudolf Steiner and how Gary and I have also done multiple shows about angelic incursions on the planet. And although Rudolf Steiner doesn't mention specifically the words angelic incursion, he talked about in his books that from 1841 to 1879 there was a war between Archangel Michael and his legion and the dark forces, the rebellious Grigori, so to say, and that it culminated in November of 1879, and Archangel Michael cast these dark forces down onto Earth. Now, I had asked Gary if he thought this was another incursion, if this is possible, and Gary had an interesting way of answering it, so I wanted him to get into that. And also, I wanted to also ask the question if Archangel Michael and God is looking out for the best of humankind, why would these dark forces be put down on the planet? Is it for a test? Is it a necessary test for humankind or something like that? So I was interested in that angle as well.
Yeah, all good points. So let's sort of begin with Michael, I think. And he is a very important archangel. He is the one who, in the end time, in Revelation 12, will lead the armies of heaven against the armies of Satan in the war in heaven at the time of Antichrist coming to power. And Antichrist is with them because Antichrist actually throws down some of the starry host in Daniel 8. So Michael is also classified as the angel kind of protector of Israel and Judah. So in the book of Daniel, he is in Daniel 12, which is the midpoint at the same time as that angelic war. He stands up because he's sitting down there and he stands up again. And that's because Antichrist has come to power and the war in heaven is about to start. So he has an interconnection between major events, particularly with the interaction of fallen angels. So before we get that context in the book of Daniel, we're told that he fights in Daniel, um, I think it's in Daniel 11, but it could be in Daniel 10. But it's referring to the best place that he's referring back to is Daniel 8 with that prophecy. So Michael is saying that he is fighting against the prince of Persia, and then soon he'll be fighting against the prince of Greece, which will be Alexander, and an antichrist type figure. So he fights against, as you pull that out of it, because this is talking about beast empires that Daniel 7 talks about, the four great beast empires of Babylon, Persia, Medes, Greece, the four notable ones that take over after that, and then Rome after that. And before the four, there's Assyria and there's Egypt, and then there's a seventh empire that comes. Now, he doesn't stop the beast empire from coming in any of those cases. He fights against them as almost like in a restraining role. And what he's doing, I think, my speculation in terms of how I interpret that, he's not preventing the empire from coming, just like he doesn't prevent the end time empire from coming, but he stops restraining to allow Antichrist to come to power. And so all of the beast empires are trying to bring Antichrist to power. So now that's just sort of the background to understand the environment of the question. So if there was an incursion or a renewal of tensions, let's say, in the cosmic war between good and evil, biblically between loyal angels and God and Satan and the fallen angels, that he's referencing that is starting that is not out of line with the understanding of cycles that the Bible and other religions talk about, where
Interesting.
you have nothing is new under the sun, what was
Yeah,
will be again, right? So things happen again and again. And so every time you had a beast empire, there's an opportunity to have an antichrist, just as there would have been an antichrist figure, whether it's King Sudras, or it would be Atlas, or whichever one you want to pick out of antediluvian history. There would have been an antichrist figure with a destruction by fire that almost came about, but the flood comes along to stop that destruction by fire that's reserved for the end time. So, getting back to the question now is, if that was a second incursion is the term, which I usually look at incursion as a term of recreation of giants and that go along with it,
absolutely.
and the downloading of angelic technology.
Absolutely.
What we do see is a beginning of something. Industrial age. We have, the Civil War that sort of remodels the U.S. for that period of time and right into our time. You have the start of interesting religions that will play a significant role, like that extend out of Gnosticism. This will be Theosophy, and then later New Age, and also Ariosophy that's going to show up in National Socialism, the National Socialist Worker Party of Germany, that is also funneling out of this. This is the time of the discovery of the altar of Zeus that gets moved back to Germany as well in that same period. So you have a lot of things that are going on that is almost indicating a beginning to another cycle. And then you see this formation with Antichrist using a real Aryan Grail Volkish ideology over on Theosophy with his Rice Church that wants to create a universal religion with that church, wants to create a world government, and wants to have a 1,000-year reign or the Third Reich. And this ramping up of technology, the things that a bankrupt nation shouldn't have after losing World War One. All of a sudden, they have tanks that are still the model with the Panzer and the Tiger tanks of that low profile of the tank technology that's still used to this day. If they could produce enough, they would win the war. They create out of nowhere technology like the jet engine, technology like the rockets, technology like the single winged aircraft, this bell shaped thing that looks like a top of a holy temple in India that is thought to have been some sort of interdimensional technology. And all of this was gobbled up by Operation Paperclip after World War II. But you see that coming to a fruition, but it's not really the time yet. But that doesn't mean we're not moving into that end time period, because with all of that, you get this interesting sort of conflation of events in 1947. You get Admiral Byrd saying he's found this opening at the North Pole to the hollow earth, or to inner earth, or to Arcata, or the thousand different names that we could have for that history and mythos that's in all cultures all around the world. You have the Declaration of Independence in Israel. You have the Roslin alien beginning to the modern age of the aliens becoming visible. So you have a lot of things that are happening as an extension, and within a couple of years after World War II, as a consequence of World War II. So what I think is what you're saying is the restraining aspect of that beast empire coming into play, and that's still reserved for the end time. So I don't think it was a second incursion. I think it's the beginning of the final play, and what we saw in World War II is becomes an archetype, or something that we can look on to say, what would the end time look like? And so I think we're starting to see that cycle ramp up, but now it's at a pace and a level that would be more appropriate aligned with what happened just before the flood, with the creation of the giants. Hence, there would be another incursion. Somehow, some way, giants will show up and impact us in the end time, and that our technology has to be ramped up to be able to take on the God of the Bible, to have this war, to have us part of that war, and to promise Godhood. So they have to give us that angelic technology, just as Azazel gave to all of those arts and crafts to destroy the world by fire, if that was permitted to play out. So that's how I would look at it. It might be the beginning of that age, of the end of the age, that starts into the new age. And in polytheism, the new age of Aquarius is the destruction by fire. It doesn't happen at the end of the last age, it happens at the beginning of the next stage of Aquarius. So I think that's probably how I would sort of classify it. It was a beginning or a naissance to a ramp up to this major collision. So could have there been a battle between Satan and the fallen angels? I mean, the Satan and the fallen angels, and with the angels of Michael and God? Absolutely. But not to the same level of degree that's going to be coming.
Yeah, that's very interesting and well put, Gary. So I just wanted to clear up, and I think it's in line with what you're saying, that yes, there's quite possibly there was an astral war, so to say, between Archangel, maybe an ongoing war that's been going on for eons, and there was a battle that
Yeah,
culminated in late November. Now, this was an incursion, because an incursion is when there's a physical manifestation on this
yeah.
planet of giants and angelic beings posing as humans, even,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
and I get there from a couple things. We're not told that there's this ongoing sets of wars, right?
yeah,
But we are told there was a rebellion, and that rebellion is ongoing. And if you have an ongoing rebellion, you're probably going to have you know,
outcomes,
battles,
yeah,
outcomes,
and
and
outcomes, yeah,
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 battles and outcomes is a good
yeah.
way of putting it
So it
throughout the
seems like
history.
if they were cast down in 1879, some of these dark forces. Now let's get to this. They're not actually an incursion. They're these unseen forces that are now starting to coerce the thoughts and minds of humanity, diverting us off our spiritual course, giving us technologies and whispers to keep us spiritually preoccupied,
Yes.
and divert us off our course. Because obviously, if they just fell from a dimension slightly higher than us, they wouldn't want us to raise spiritually higher with
No.
knowledge. So they're going to give us knowledge to keep us spiritually preoccupied.
Yes, but not that's dangerous to them.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. Very, very interesting. So it's like sort of gradually building for them to be able to physically manifest and start to create what their goal is, and ultimately to flood the world
Yeah.
once again with these giants, and or some sort of variation of the past,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, now let's get to that before we get into the different tribes of giants and possibly if they're related to even the sun and moon being in a different place that made dinosaurs and all plant life and all things bigger in the past. But also, I wanted to address the fact that if Michael and Archangel Michael and his legion are fighting these dark forces, why would he cast them down to affect the thoughts of humanity? Is it like a necessary test that we need, or is this something that is uncontrollable? Or
Yeah, so I think there's two things going on with the question that you're talking about. There's the smaller context and there's the larger context. So the only reason to throw angels down on the smaller context is that they have invaded heaven. You would cast them back
very
out.
interesting. Yes.
But in terms of the larger one where they were cast down, they are here and and are able to sift us as humanity and the choices that we face and have to make decisions on that further indict them in everything that they do against humanity. So yes, they are here to test us. They are here to actually try and destroy us from the face of the earth. They know that we were created as Adamites in Genesis 2 with Adam to be the resolution to the angelic rebellion. So that's why they've been against us ever since. And it's, it begins with the hash being utilized to deceive Eve and Adam for the
Yeah.
first revenge, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the fallen angels where Satan induces or entices, according to the mythology of the rebellious ones, of the ones that report to him, to look upon human women as beautiful and that they should have sex with them. He entices them to do that, to create the giants. And they do that willingly because they're sworn in an oath with Herem anathema at Mount Hermon to do so. And they're wise enough to know how powerful God is. So they want humanity wiped from the face of the earth to justify their rebellion and win a settlement, probably the earth and whatever associated with the earth, on going away from God. But if they have humanity wiped from the face of the earth because they rebelled from God or were led astray, then that would justify their rebellion because everything that God creates would rebel, right? And so what they do though is they create another race or possibly races and likely multiple races like the elementals, for example, that would be enemies of humankind created to destroy humankind from the face of the earth, which is what happened before the flood. They ramped everything up with war and technology, and God intercedes with the flood. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed by fire. And in doing so, the angels do not have blood on their hands. They have that plausible deniability, that gap. Yes, we created them, but we didn't do it. And so they do that because they don't want to incur the might of the God Most High and incur that sooner. They're still wanting to win their rebellion, and we're the sacrificial pawns for them to get there.
Yeah, I like what you brought up too. And I think it's in the Slavonic book of Enoch, the book of secrets, where they mention the Grigori
Yes.
and their faces being withered and the silence of their mouths were perpetual,
Yep.
and I think it's in chapter 18 where the original version of that Genesis 6:4, I think is right there, where the Grigori break their vows on the shoulder of Hermon, or
Yep.
and saw the daughters of men and took them as wives
Yep.
and all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah. So I that would be an incursion when they actually make a physical manifest. Now, if
Yep.
they're coming down in 1879 as dark forces now that are diverting us off our course,
Yeah.
giving us technologies to keep us spiritually preoccupied. I
Yeah.
mean, that's totally incredible because we started to have all these new technologies arise, and we started to have all this spiritual information that seems to keep us preoccupied,
Yep.
channeling all these, and it's interesting because there's a few secrets that are truth in these channelings, and then a whole bunch of nonsense.
Yep.
EP.
Well,
Yep.
and it had hit a fever pitch
Yeah.
by the time of World War II. Like it was just part of the whole atmosphere. I mean, seances, channeling, fortune
Yeah.
telling,
Yeah.
the visibility of it was something that we don't fully sort of understand it in our generation, but it was sort of reeled back to a more lower sort of volume type, so to speak, after World War II. And then it's been increasing again from about the 60s, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I also found some evidence that, yeah, you're totally true. I also found some evidence too that information that we were never supposed to see that had to do with how the soul travels in the afterlife all started to be found in 1879. You have the
Yeah.
pyramid texts of Unis,
Yeah.
and all found in eight. They were first found in 1879. You have the golden tablets of Orpheus and
Yeah.
Thuri and Petalia. They all were 1879. It all has to
Yeah.
do with,
Well, and so many other things, and whether or not they're all related or not, they probably are. But I mean, you have Mormonism that is being created in the same amount, which is
wow,
right.
wow.
And all sorts of people, like Casey, who are entering into the field, and people who are bringing knowledge from the other realm and are channeling in all sorts of different ways. And I connect those two together because Casey verbally did it, and Smith actually received the information
Yeah,
and wrote it down. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Very interesting. Now let's get into let's get into some of the different tribes of giants now that
yeah,
we're starting to create. Because I even had somebody on that considers himself an expert recently.
oh
He's
yeah,
an author on Nephilim, and
yeah,
he kind of generalized the tribes, and I didn't push it with him, but I didn't really understood.
yeah,
He considered all the tribes Amorites.
yeah. Well, yeah. So,
And I'm like, well, you got the Amalekites, you got the
yeah,
Gibbarim, the Anakim, you got all these different things.
yeah,
They can't be Phoenician. And then
yeah,
he said that he considered the Amorites to be the ones that inhabited the Ohio mounds.
yeah.
And I don't see how you can find that as evidence for that specific tribe, you know?
Yes, it's a it's quite a superficial, not to I don't like to criticize other
Yeah,
people
no,
and yeah.
I'm just a little confused with how.
Well, and that's
Yeah,
how we get confused is that superficial
yeah,
statements and again not a lot of supporting information that goes with it that makes any sense to the larger sort of story. So are Amorites a people? Yes. Were the Amorites in the covenant land? Yes. Were the Amorites giants? Partly. But
there
they
was
are
some in
not.
there.
Yeah. So who are the Amorites? Well, there are 10 tribes of the Canaanites that are listed in the Table of Nations, and they're in there. What's interesting is where they're located is within 9 tribes. And those 9 tribes do not have a patriarch in the Table of Nations. So Canaan, we have his patriarch, and he produces as the father Sidon and Heth. So Hittites and Sidonians, we understand who they are, but the Amorites do not have a patriarch. The Jebusites do not have a patriarch.
The Hittites were the vile dogs, right?
Yeah, and they totally intermarried with the Indo-Aryans in the north, the dark-haired ones, which is why they're depicted as dark-haired ones, and they have a different skin color than the rest of the Canaanite tribes.
Yeah.
So they become hybrid giants as Indo-Aryans, which is something that you can now look at, and so did the Sidonians, because they're the people of Tyr, and they're depicted the same, and they have the same worship of Baal and Mount Hermon that goes with this. But the Amorites are different. They are blonde haired and basically pale skinned and mostly blue eyed. And they do not, as I say, have a patriarch, but they're classified as a Canaanite. So how does that come to be? Well, if we go to the Ugaritic text, which is really interesting because, I like to quote the Ugaritic text because
Yeah, I
it's in
love
the
this. Go.
Semitic
I could listen to
language.
you all
Yeah.
day.
In the Baalim Council, who created the Rephaim giants after the flood. you have several gods that are in there. And Amor, and Amaru, as he's also known as, is one of those gods, right? Just as Raphael in a couple of transliterations different than the Raphael that's just slightly different, but the meaning would be the same, is one of the seven names of Baal. Raphael is one of the angels, one of the seven archangels that would show up in the KJV in the Book of Enoch, right?
That's
In the
me,
Apocrypha.
Raphael.
Yeah, yeah. So it could mean healer of God or giant of God,
Oh
depending
man,
on or
it's the
spirit of
story of my life.
evil spirit of God. So which was does makes no sense, but you could translate them that way. And so Amor creates two servants as his offspring, and one is named Amor as well. So now we have a giant that's serving in the assembly of giants of the Datanu, who would take a female from a Canaanite tribe as I start to connect some dots. And just as Amor has the name passed on from the gods, so that is the patronymic name passed on. And now Amor starts to tribe that would be called passing that name on eponymously to name the tribe after. So Amorite is singular in the Hebrew, Emoriy, Emory, or Amor, in as it would be understood in other Semitic words, and is uh, essentially the same word as Amor.
Interesting.
So
Was the Ammonites related to the same tribe?
no,
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 so they're
those
completely different.
they're completely different. Yeah, they come from the descendants of Shem.
That's right.
And
That's right.
right,
Right. I got to
yeah,
write
and
that down.
Lot, right? Lot being directly related to
People
Abraham,
of
and
Shem. That's right.
yeah. So, so the Amorites are described in the book of Amos as uh, like the they're giant-like tribes. They're like the cedars of Lebanon. So what they are is what the Egyptian execration text describes the Amorites as living amongst the Anakim. They're hybrids. So,
Mm.
and Anakim are also blonde haired. So there's, and so are the Amalekim, which gives you kind of two giant tribes where maybe the patriarch
Yeah, the
is
Amalekites.
associated with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're called the Shazoo in the execration text. You would know them from your more Eastern research from the Shamau and the Amau, the upper
Yes.
and the lower house, right? And
Yes.
so that would be the term that they would be called. And these are hybrid giants. They are 7 to 9 feet tall versus, say, 10 to 19 feet tall as you get into the size of Gilgamesh, with Og in between and Goliath in between. Goliath would be 11 feet 3 inches, and Og would be somewhere from 12 to 15 feet tall based on his bed size, just as Orontes, whom the river in that area of the world is named after, was also 19 feet tall. So that's kind of the range. But so are they giants? Yes, they're giants. And so we can actually trace, and in book two, actually trace these hybrid giants back to a Rephaim patriarch for all of the 9 tribes. And some of them are easier because they're all named after a patriarch. They're all named after cities that are named after this important Nephilim or a god. And you get multiple sources to arrive the patriarch's name at. So Jebus or Yebus, as it would have been pronounced with the J being a Y, would be the patriarch for the Jebusites and so on and so forth. But I won't go through all the minutia of that. So now the Amorites they don't do much for migrations, but the Sidonians and the people of Tyre do.
That's what I figured.
And
And even Phoenicians, right? They were
and
seafaring.
Phoenice, they're the
Yeah.
same group of people, right?
I was gonna ask. I didn't want to push it because I didn't want to make the guy look bad. But the first thing I was gonna ask was like, I don't think they were even seafaring people, the
No, they're
Amorites.
not. They're not
Yeah,
even described that way. Um, but again,
I did tell him I thought it was more likely the Phoenicians because they were merchants and
yeah,
seafaring and trading and
yeah.
evil, everything he
Now,
was describing.
And typically we don't get blonde-haired giants in North America. We get red-haired giants.
Interesting. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
one thing that you mentioned earlier, I forgot. I wrote it down.
those are
I've
Horim giants.
I've read in the past many times, like you had mentioned Adam,
Yeah,
that I've read in different tales that Adam was the first race of the red-skinned race, and he was a giant man.
yeah. Yeah, red clay is one of the definitions for Adam. So sort of a reddish, pinkish hue to it.
And he would have been enormous in size.
No, not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily. Okay.
No.
So where do they get those tales get from giant Adam being the first man and being a giant red-skinned race?
Yeah, so you get at it from two different sort of angles. One being is there's a theory that the environment was so different before the flood that everything was giant-like,
Interesting.
right? And
I
so
thought that as well. Yeah.
yeah, and that may there, and I don't disagree that the environment was different, but it's hard to make that transition. And I'll give you a one short version on why it's difficult to make that connect with what happens after the flood is so in that tradition, Noah and all of his family are giants as well. But Noah's never classified as a giant before the flood or after the flood. The sons are never classified as giants, and the descendants that come down through Abraham aren't giants, and all the other ones. So it's hard to say how did they shrink and why were they never called giants, except in some polytheist accounts that
Yeah.
they're all giants, but they don't talk about their offspring as being giants. So
Yeah,
again, there's that.
and they do give some characteristics that allude to it, but they don't say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, there was certainly an environment in the world that was even different still, which whatever caused the last ice age. So that as we get the melting away of the polar caps, we're seeing subtropical plants that were growing there.
Yeah.
Okay, so further, so they may be transposing that onto the antediluvian epoch, but we do know, I mean, it was a different environment to a certain degree, but were was everything bigger? Hard to say, but
Yeah.
likely not. Um, is how I would fall on that because you just can't make that connection immediately after the flood. Why everything is smaller and different, including all the animals. We
Yeah.
don't
I
get
mean,
giant animals either. So
I
from
guess if like if the Earth was in a different position to the moon and the sun, like
yep,
if the moon's position was closer to Earth or something like that, it
yep,
would change the gravitational force but it might make things more smaller and
yep,
compact.
yeah, it might as well as yeah. We're
You
not
know,
sure exactly how
yeah.
that plays out.
But I know if the
Um,
cosmic rays come to the planet, it could
yeah,
mutate and
yeah,
change the way, beings are, but it also might
yeah,
destroy and degrade the cell, whether to make it bigger.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that polytheist accounts make a distinction between humans and giants as well before the flood. So,
So
so
would
what
you core?
happens? Well, so let me finish.
Yeah, yeah,
So how they get there with Adam as being a giant is he was created as a giant, but that's different than the humans, right? He's part of the
yeah,
giant races, right? Okay, but here's the thing: is if everything was giant like in the antediluvian epoch, and then giants were created, that means those giants would have to be enormously larger than the giants that were already there, right?
yeah,
Because a giant is so much bigger than anything of its related type of species. So you get into some problematic unfolding of okay, how does that play out? And how do I match up all of these other details? So yes, I think the environment was different. Maybe it played out a little bit differently. I look at giant-like things that were being done before the flood would have been more of nothing new is under the sun. And how do I create giant-like things like I might have done between Genesis 1, and 2, if you go back that far, right? So they were creating, things that were manipulated through existing beings that were here were before the flood. And so, and then when talking about that, that would be essentially mostly the fallen angels, but some of that technology would have been passed on to the giants as well. So they may have been doing some of that.
Yeah. So would you correlate the dinosaurs of the ancient past with some sort of like hybriding of fallen angels?
I think when you look at dinosaurs, those are they used to be called dragons
Yeah.
before they were changed to
I mean, shit.
dinosaurs. So seraphim angels are dragons, heavenly dragons are serpentine beings, and they like to create things that would honor them, created after their image to counterfeit everything that God does. We see dinosaurs now being shown with more that have feathers than don't have feathers. So, yes, they're
Yeah.
reptilian, but they are now more seraphim like as they go.
Very interesting.
Just as the Nahash is the being that is going to deceive Eve and Adam, and as a serpent being, and as a sorcerer, necromancer, enchanter, as you take that back to its source word, Nahash. So obviously a priest of polytheism before Adam is created, by inference there. And according to the Gnostics, was the royal being before Adam. And so was a willing participant because it didn't want to lose its position. But it's serpentine, and would have been the most favored and sentient being of that time, which was reptilian, which can't be a coincidence. So this was a beast of the field created on day 6. So either God created a serpentine, walking, talking, intelligent being, or the seraphim took some existing DNA manipulation and copulation and all the mixture that they do to create other beings and created the Nahash serpent being after their image that way. But either way, it seemed to be the favored sentient being by the time of Eden.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I would agree. I would agree with what you're saying. And if a lot of the dinosaurs would have continued, some of them would have been like bipedal, walking around like reptilians and stuff like that, I think, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, then the hash species would have been, I mean, it was as big as a camel. It was bigger than humans, according to the Gnostics. And
Wow.
could have had flying dragons as well, right?
Yeah. And just the idea of those is just frightening. Even the stories of the giants that we're going to get into in the rest of the show. I mean, we're talking about, and I got to be careful how I word some of it on YouTube, but we're talking about tales from all over the planet. There were people that didn't have communication with each other, and they're talking about them kind of being, ferocious and strong, but also cowardly. Like they would steal women in the middle of the night. They would attack people when they're sleeping and things like that. And then they would like literally have intercourse with the woman until she was dead through like magical rituals.
Yep.
So that's the most frightening thing. Imagine a tribe of giants doing that to a woman until she dies, until
Yeah.
that's one of the most nightmarish things you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And it's talked about in all sorts of tales. I mean, even Gary, I found that we've talked about it in prior shows, but how do you feel about the tales with King Og when some Hebrew tales, even some of the Far East, has him being right alongside Noah's Ark?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe Noah even putting him on the ark and feeding him in
Yeah.
some
And
stories.
in Jewish legends, and Louis Ginsburg records this and there's multiple books on this, and also in Kabbalism, he's like a stowaway on the ark, or as
Yeah.
he's depicted in the legends, he's hanging on to the edge on the
Yeah,
ropes.
as the floodwaters are rising, right?
Yeah,
Vividly
and
describe it. Yeah.
and then in the last Noah movie, it wasn't Og that was depicted, but it was Tubal Cain that was depicted hanging on to the ropes as a stowaway. So that is part of what comes down through history. What we're told about Og is he's the last of the giants. That's the Hebrew word Rapha. He's the last of the Rephaim. So then you get down, okay, did Rephaim, were they before the flood or after the flood? And of course, books like the Lost Book of King Og would place them before the flood. And he's a survivor from the flood, as opposed to being recreated after the flood. So, and I lean more to second incursion, but I also leave a crack open for survival as well. So there's a possibility it could go either way. But he's not Nephilim. no matter how you get there, biblically, from a Judaic sources, he's not Nephilim, so he's
He's
distinct.
Rephaim.
He's Rephaim, yes.
Yeah.
And so, did he survive the flood? Possibly. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me whether he survives the flood or he's part of the first generation of giants created by the Balaam Council after the flood. He's a giant, and he's a red-haired giant, and he is the last of the giants. In terms of an originating state, because when Israel, after they kill King Og, they cross into the covenant land and they're fighting lots of Rephaim, the lots of Anakim, all these different giants that are there. So we want to look at the detail on that, but we want to be careful to get too hung up on what that means with him as being the last of the giants. So I think it's either last of the giants before the flood or the last of the original ones created after the flood. And that's about the best way to do it. And how I get there biblically for survival, that I leave that small crack open, is that God in Genesis 6 and 7 says that he was going to create with the flood everything, destroy everything on the earth he created. He did not create the giants. So,
Interesting. That's a weird
so
loophole.
it's a legal loophole.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is, and it could be very specific language that we want to keep in the back of our minds as to how giants show up. And what's also interesting in the Ugaritic texts, in the Sumerian traditions, in the Greek traditions, and by implication and inference in the biblical accounts, you have giants created before the flood and after the flood. And so the best sort of example is in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh is created by Nin, a fertility bull goddess, and King Lugobanda, sixth generation after the flood. But Utnapishtim, who is part of the Gilgamesh tales, and he's going to go seek him out, is the survivor with his family from the flood. So you get a second incursion recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And Hesiod clearly noted there was two races of giants, one that was killed in all of the wars before the flood, and then one's created again after the flood.
That's incredible information right there, everybody. So proof, check it out, Epic of Gilgamesh, possible proof of a second incursion. Very interesting, Gary. Yeah, there were stories even of Og's bones that were they talked about were so large that they had to use it to cross a river as a bridge.
Yeah.
All sorts, there's all sorts of tales.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah,
he would have had to fit in the bed.
yeah.
So that's where I say we got to watch about how myth embellishes things. So, I mean,
And
his
what, that
bed
was
was,
13 feet, right? 13
well,
feet or something?
exact dimensions biblically recorded is 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. So he's the king of Ugarit. He's the king of Ashtaroth. He's the king of Edrei. So he's a royale, right? And so they're measured according to Josephus on 21 inches versus 18 inches. So that makes the bed about 16 feet tall and 7 feet wide. So he's not as big as
Wow.
Gilgamesh, as the red-haired giant versus the dark-haired giants, but he's going to fit into that bed. And it was made of iron because wood would not hold his weight. And it was left on display in Rabbah for centuries so that the Israelites would never forget the size of the people they were fighting against, right?
Wow. It's incredible.
And so that would, so to fit in the bed, he's going to be maximum, let's say, 15 feet tall and probably like 12 feet tall. If he's the last of a breed, he'd be bigger than
Frightening.
Goliath. That's kind of how I get there. 12 feet is also sort of a standard sizing for a lot of Greek giants like Achilles and others. Um, and that he would have been wide as well, stocky. So four cubits would be 7 feet wide. So he'd be, less
Whoa.
than that. So he'd be
Yeah.
more like, 4 to 6 feet wide.
Man, that's a unit right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. And they used that in ancient times as the model for the most common of the red-haired and blonde-haired giants that were had a height to width ratio of 2 to 1 versus 3 to 1 of humans. So when it's describing giants in the King James Version Bible, or it uses the word stout, and definitions of the descriptions that will have stout in there is to describe the consistency not of fat, but of muscular and stocky. So Gilgamesh was 11 cubits tall, which would make him king of Uruk at 19 feet tall, and 7 cubits wide. So 7 cubits wide. Not quite the same 2 to 1, but still stocky and still much larger than what Og was.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was at an event that I was part of last weekend, and usually when I talk to priests, there was a bishop that was part of the event. And usually when I talk to priests, they have no idea about the giants.
Yeah.
This guy actually did. He actually did know about it, and he was even talking about the fact that it was the policy of the church when any bones were discovered, get rid of them, burn them.
Yep.
They're
Yep.
evil,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know.
Don't leave a record.
Yeah, and I know, there's been books published by different people out there, Hugh Newman and different people putting all the
Yeah.
newspaper articles, but I like to talk about things that aren't always regurgitated. I know there was one thing in Italy that was in 1969, and they found, I think, 50 skeletons, 50 giant. Those supposedly in Italy during a construction crew in Terracina, which is like
Yep.
60 miles from Rome,
Yep.
and their blades of the bulldozers had hit something, and it was like a long row of tile coffins.
Yep.
And there was no descriptions, no markings. They were just buried giants, and they were extremely tall. And there was a guy in the 1960s that wrote about
Yep.
all this, John Battle.
Yep.
You ever hear of John
Yep.
Battle?
Yep.
Yeah, I have some of his books, like the Spaceman, like Spaceman and Giants and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
And and it's not like we don't have some records, but I mean, there's been a lot of censoring and
yeah.
hiding of things and
And
destroying
also
of
where
things.
the
Yeah.
newspapers sensationalizing things for headlines sometimes.
Typically not. Not. I mean, the newspaper articles from 1950 to 1850. They're quite consistent in the sizes and the measurements. They had university people out there always measuring the bones. And two things happened with all of those newspaper stories. And I have a link for people. If they get a hold of me, I'll send it to you, where you go to the spreadsheet, it gives you the dimensions, and you can bring up the actual newspaper article on another link that's on the spreadsheet
Yeah,
from
if
the
you want to send
original
it to me too,
newspaper.
I could send it to
I will.
people if they want.
Yep,
Yeah.
I will. Yeah. And so two stories are consistent when there were bones discovered in North America. One was as a university was called, they would go out, do the excavation, do the measurements, and then call the Smithsonian and would go to the Smithsonian, and then they all record after that would disappear. The other thing that happened was it went directly as a call or a message to the Smithsonian. They took all of the bones, documented everything, then took it back, and then all records disappear after that. So there's a consistent diminishing of this out of our history so that they can sort of control the information.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many, and I know for a fact because I've talked to people that I know that are friends of family and all sorts of stuff all throughout Italy and Sardinia,
Yeah.
where even in the 1960s and 70s, they were, uncovering these
Yeah.
giant bones and
Because
they were paying local farmers and stuff to help put them on pallets.
yeah. Well, let's face, I mean, the Etruscans, who were the Proto-Latins, were giants.
Yeah, well, there were some mixed in for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, definitely.
They're part of the Indo-Aryan, so they're going to be giants. So,
Yep.
yeah. And there's records that come down through, the time of the Caesars, in terms of giants. You have Passio and Secundalia in the time of Augustus, and they were about 10 feet tall. You've got Gabarus that was almost 9.5 feet tall in the time of Claudius, and Maximus, which is even further downstream, is you have a Thracian that's 9 feet tall, and these were warriors. These weren't just tall. These were powerful, perfect kind of warriors. So there's a continuous history of this, just as Josephus said during his time. which was the same time Jesus lived and a little bit afterwards, that bones were kept on display in Judah till 70 AD, until the destruction of the bones that were that the Israelites had fought against because they were completely bigger and unlike human bones anatomy. And again, it was they were kept on display to remind the Israelites of their history and who their people fought to win the covenant land. But again, all of this just sort of disappears into the shadows because the Royals don't want you to know their connections to the Giants.
That's for sure. That's for sure. And we can get into specific areas too, and like on Earth specifically, what do you think? What tribes came here and all that, and also in the different Americas.
Yeah.
I found a story too, Gary, in the Brazilian Air Force cadets. They were talking to a tribe in Calapalos Caiopo tribe in Brazil,
Hmm.
and they said that they came across with these 7.5 foot giants in the Brazilian rainforest, and this was
Yeah.
in the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
And it was in the London Daily Mirror that this was reported in, and they said that they had the Xingu region of the Mato Grosso, that they captured a young boy during a skirmish with the giants, and he grew to be almost 8 foot tall, and they kept him with the tribe, and the cadets asked him where is he now, and the chief shrugged. He became so huge and strong that he frightened the villagers. When he became rebellious, he was sentenced to death and executed. So they said that they had captured a young boy of these
Yeah.
giants, and he grew to be 8 foot tall with this tribe.
Yeah.
And up until the 1960s, even they had him, and he had to be executed because he got so rebellious.
Yeah. And, South America, I mean, we have the Peruvian elongated skulls that were discovered. And for people who aren't familiar with it, elongated skulls are associated with giants, and that there are smaller elongated skulls who would want to emulate the look of their demigods, and they would bind children when they were babies to create an elongated skull. But what you can't do with binding is create more volume. It's the same internal volume, it's just longer, and you can't get rid of the sutures. And the giant elongated skulls don't have sutures and they have significant larger size. So you want to Google what that sort of looks like. Just imagine these two things. One is the ancient kings wore these humongous hats to cover these humongous cone heads, so to speak. And the best ones are shown in Egypt, and where you can get like Nefertiti with a hat on, without a hat on, Akhenaten with a hat on and without. So you can see the size of these um, elongated reptilian features, and Google Akhenaten for more of that reptilian sort of features. So these skulls are mostly associated with red hair, just as the bones and the discoveries in North America were more associated with red hair. And again, the elongated skulls and varying size. So you've got hybrid smaller giants through intermarriage, right up to 18 feet tall in some of the newspaper accounts. Some even larger, but mostly they're 10 to 12 feet tall, and that sort of range would be more like the average. So you have a tribe that is known in South America. If we had better records that weren't, and most of the Central and South American records were destroyed with the settlement of the New World.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you
you know,
ever seen
the
the books of the Aztec king?
no,
There's one. What's it? I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Ishtalil. It's
Ixtaca.
ISCHTLIL dash TSCHOTSCHITL.
Oh,
Tishotl. Ishtal. It was an Aztec king.
yeah,
And he talks about there was a general agreement that the giant king names were the first inhabitants of the country. They were
yeah,
horrible monsters. They had the habits of ugly vices. They terrorized all the people. Fate marked them down at last. They were slain by the angry gods. All nature trembled. The seas rose up, and the mountains became volcanoes.
Yeah, and the Aztecs basically have the same history as the Quiche Maya, but the Aztecs will take their ancestors back to white giants from an island continent that they call Atlan and the House of Atlan, which is likely,
Yeah, Outlawn. Yeah.
yeah, which is likely, from Atlas or something related to that, or Atlantis, and seems to be a post-Diluvian settlement. And the Quiche Maya come from three different tribes from this island continent as well. So they're associated with that. The Peruvian ones, they called those giants manta. So with the Quiche Maya, probably the Olmecs you would take back and the Toltecs as a couple of those tribes of those three first tribes that came from that island. And as you move up the continent, you have the Hopi, and they had patriarch Bahana, which was white skinned, and from the White Snake Clan from an island continent after the flood. So you see the consistency of that story of giants settling the land after the flood, but not to dismiss that there weren't migrations from the Middle East, mostly through the Phoenicians, and some Amorites might be mixed in there, some, because they were one of the more dominant tribes. But most of the archaeological evidence comes from mostly the Phoenicians, I think, and the Canaanites
Yeah.
to the north.
And
And so you would have had maybe some of that, or at the time of the taking of the covenant land, some of the giant tribes may have migrated out and some to North America as well. But the First Nations have giants throughout their oral history in all of the tribes. I mean, there's different names for all of them, but we just started off with a consistency of a story
yeah.
that makes no sense from how we understand our history or from a mathematical basis of how they could have the same story from the same
It's called
snake white
evidence. Yeah.
clan from the same island continent. Makes no sense whatsoever unless there's some veracity to this.
Yeah, it's called evidence. It's and and there's interesting. You mentioned the Manta region, right, of Peru.
Yeah,
Manta region, yeah, the Mont
yeah,
and there's I was writing about this on my Patreon not too long ago that there was supposedly there lived a people at that in that region who worshipped this giant huge emerald, like, and it was this like larger than an ostrich egg emerald, and it was placed on this altar, and they was related to giants and things like that. So I don't know if how truth it is, but supposedly of they were wearing like animal skins, and others
yeah,
walked the land without clothes as well, just walked the land nude.
yeah,
They have all the story of them, and that the giant like built this deep well underneath the water so he can get sweet water in that area where they had no water. Like there's a whole bunch of stories, and they were they were unable to kill some of the game to feed all their appetite, so they had to move out of the area. But some of them they were talking about stood 20 foot tall even.
yeah.
So these are huge. And
There's,
then they were taken. They said that the men and women would be captured or killed, and they would become part of their cannibal feast or some
yeah.
sort of sex rituals and things like that. So that's intense.
Well, and again, you get that same consistency of how the giants distinguish themselves from the humans and how they did not, and who knows how it gets there. I mean, but how it ends up in all of the stories is that the giants are hunting humans for food and rituals. And it's the humans that, through greater numbers, because there's some sort of fertility issue that I've talked about on many shows, with the post-Diluvian giants and
Yeah,
creating lack of females. That's why they have to marry human females to reproduce, and that's how you get the shrinking size and the
yeah. I think
shrinking sort
well,
of.
in a few generations, they found themselves without women.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So they had to intermarry, and for Christians out there saying, well, you've raised this now a few times. Do you have any examples? Yes. Before I move on, we have an example. Let's just take that one off the table. So in Genesis 36, which is one of the most interesting Old Testament passages that is not part of the Table of Nations, but you need it to understand what's going on in the early post-Diluvian world, is you have Esau, brother of Jacob, producing a son named Eliphaz. Eliphaz will intermarry with Timnah, daughter of Seir, the Duke of Seir, who is a Horim giant, and she's a pure blood matriarchal giant, and they're going to start a
Wow.
hybrid race called the Amalekites,
Mod
not to be
on.
confused with the Amalekim, right? And they're going to move and live amongst the Amalekim and take the name eponymously from Amalek, right? Um, and so, yes, we have an example. And also, Esau married another Horim, which would have created likely the Horites versus the Horim, because she's also a Horim, and her name is Oholibama. So you have two hybrid races and intermarriages starting new peoples. And what they did, because of the inability to reproduce, they would create new dynasties with a pure blood fairy queen, and understand that Duke goes back to um, to a word that is very, very much associated with fairy. It's Aleph, and the Alephim, as the Catholic Church would call these giant kings in Edom. Notice that
Interesting.
I am a
Yeah.
male plural, and that's the transliteration of elf or elven and the elven bloodline, the fairy queens and fairy kings. So and that's how the Rh negative and the genes would be passed on. So um, it all sort of fits. So now when you understand that they have to do this in North America, things make sense because they're the same species. They're the same race of people and giants. So, and now you have the similar story that's showing up all through the First Nations. They're the enemies of the humans who have to go to war with them continually, right up till the time and beyond of when North America is being settled, beyond 1850 even. And if you say to people from the First Nations, well, that's just myth, well, they're going to be quite upset. This is their history. It's in an oral tradition, but it's their history.
Yeah. Have you ever heard near the Mississippi River, they have legends of the giants from the natives there, and they call them the
Yeah.
Allegheny or Telegewi.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
What do you
and
think about that word?
well, I'm not so sure what I think about the word, but yeah,
Because it seems like there's like could be like the Albigins,
yeah.
and there's different words that seems like it might be connected to the Allegheny and different
Well,
things.
I mean, everything is passed on to hold the history.
Yeah.
So there's always a connection there. And so with trouble is with oral histories is it's hard to make the connections versus where you have written histories, right? To follow that sort of etymology. But what we can say is that those people, and because I'm not that tribe will make my tongue go into knots. It's like that king of the Aztecs you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I try and avoid things. I don't like pulling muscles in my tongue.
Seashells. Seashells.
Yeah, they have the same archaeological engineering and design in terms of the ruins as do the Hopi that the Aztecs and the Quiché have. And it's not clear from the history whether or not they migrate north to settle in North America, or the first settlements are in North America and they migrate south. But they all take their beginnings back to this island continent. So now you're into the mound area as you move up middle North America and into the Serpent Mounds and other places. And again, these sites all have astrological, or not astrological, astronomical alignments and sacred geometry that's in them, including the Serpent Mounds, and that inexplicably, they're built in a way where they're not going to erode. There's a technology there as well, but as you get more over into the Hopi, you see more of the more classic sort of architecture that the Aztecs displayed or the Quiché Maya were displaying. Whether or not they inherited that and tried to rebuild it or do it themselves after that imagery, it's still the same type of imagery. So we should not be surprised when we hear that this is a common history in North America, a common troubling coexistence between the giants and the humans, and that there's names for these giants in almost all the tribes that are out there. So, like you have the Starnaki of the Navajo. Well, I mean, we have Star. I mean, I know this is being translated into, and then you have Naki, as in Anakim or Anunnaki. I mean, you just can't really make this
Incredible.
up. Yeah, and the Tuatha De Danann, I mean, they understood themselves as the Star People, and these are the blonde-haired, red-haired giants. So again, you see that sort of connection of the Star People and giants on different continents. And the dragon kings were the sons of heaven. Again, dragon, serpentine. This imagery is um, very consistent worldwide, and the people of Atlantis were thought to look like serpents. Red haired, yes. Blonde haired, yes, but with serpentine features, both before and shortly after the flood. So you have lots of these tribes. The Naholo of the Natchez, um, you know, closer to the Mississippi region is another tribe of giants, and the Chickasaw have accounts of white 10-foot giants.
Yeah.
And the Paiutes of the Sitka, if I remember that name correctly.
Sitika. Yeah, that's when they put the, is that the Lovelock Cave, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, not to belabor the issue, and I wish we had well documented stuff on this, but all we have is the oral traditions. But again, they're all talking about the same kinds of people.
Well, yeah, that one that I mentioned, the Allegheny, supposedly
Yep.
that's where they get the Allegheny River name from,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
you
part of
know?
the history.
Yep, and they helped, with that river or had something to do with that river, the tribes. It's really incredible because I don't think people really, on the most part, realize the significance of all of the places that we have these mounds and earthworks
Yeah.
and dolmens and how they were using these, the intercourse magic rituals at these locations to manifest things in this world, right? And to infiltrate our world and to keep us spiritually diverted and spiritually preoccupied. And that's exactly what this whole planet has. We're the knowledge that I would say 98% of the spiritual community out there is giving us information to keep us spiritually preoccupied, to
Yep.
divert us off our course and
Yep.
keep us, just chasing our tails, right? And
Yeah.
it's just outlandish stories be regurgitating, nothing can be proved, all this
Yep.
stuff going on. And the same with our technologies. It's just a bunch of stuff to keep us preoccupied.
Yep.
Why the plan is really implemented
Yep.
right behind our eyes. So what do you recommend, Gary, that people do to fight these energies right now? Because we're really it's culminating. It's
Yeah.
it's
Oh, it
coming to the
is.
point,
It is. And we see, the development of technologies like AI at an unprecedented rate. It's just flooding our space everywhere right now, and it's just picking up steam right now. So I think we're almost at crossing over at a crossroads, so to speak. That we need to learn as much as we can, as quick as we can, of what it was like before all of this happened, let alone what our history was, because we're going to lose it. Because once we lose control through technology, And the intermix of technology with all of these beings from other dimensions, spirits and otherwise, we're not going to be able to tell reality from fiction. Um, and
Already happening.
it's already happening, and we can't imagine to what level it's going to go to. But if you don't have something that you can anchor yourself on, you're going to get lost into the new virtual reality and you won't know what to believe.
Yeah, it's already happening before us. And unfortunately, there's even that group, UNESCO. I
Yep.
think they're involved with preventing us from getting the true knowledge as well.
Oh, sure. They all
So,
are. I mean, anything associated with the UN is,
yeah,
let's face it, they've got a special operation at Mount Herman. You can't make this up. It's their largest
yeah,
operation at the place of
it's incredible.
the yeah, where the oath was sworn to create the giants and they're trying to create
Incredible.
this new world order that
It's like,
I'm kind of looking at it. It's
where
not a
are you
new
making
world
your office?
order.
Mount Olympus?
Yeah. Yes, just look for them to bring in the Nephilim world
Mount
order.
Herman?
That's yeah, Mount Herman. Let's go there. Yeah. I don't know why we have a location there. No, well, that's right. It has the gateway to Hades there. Oh, there's a Pan temple there. Oh, giants were created there.
Oh,
Oh,
where's your
yeah.
new office? Oh, my Mount Kailash.
Yeah. So unbelievable. But
Oh my God.
so,
Oh,
yeah. And as I say, we're seeing a convergence of technology and dimensions and of time frames and you have to be able to critically analyze and do that skill soon, so that you can see what's changing.
yeah. Do you correlate Archangel Michael in this physical represent as like the flaming sword of Archangel Michael being maybe the sun doing something to Earth, or doing
Uh,
something, or bringing a fire to Earth that eliminates the evil, similar to the way the waters eliminated the evil in the past?
yeah, I don't see that as much. I see more of a defensive role, coming from Michael. I see the sun being utilized. And I see fire coming down from the sky, just as the false prophet
Yeah,
is going to be able to utilize that. I see catastrophic, contrived catastrophes designed to cattle herd us into a specific direction. And with technology of the gods, because that's what they're going to need to be able to
yeah,
do that. So I see that being used on us, but I don't see it being used by Michael.
by Michael himself.
Yeah. Um, but what he does do is he ensures for the last 3.5 years that all those beings are on the earth for the time of vengeance. So when that sword comes, that's at Armageddon, but that's from Jesus.
Well put, Gary. Well put. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I'm looking forward to the next time you come on. Is there anything that you got coming up that you want to promote?
Yeah, a couple of things. So look forward to a book out next year that I worked on in terms of providing the research for the end time chronology, secret societies, history, characters, a whole bunch of that is called the Primo conspiracy. And that's a Latin word that means
I like that.
overwhelm, um, oppress. And it's kind of the terminology we use for the AI technology. So my publisher wanted to put out a book in terms of how AI would impact the end time. So the book is titled The Oprimo Conspiracy, um, and the subtitle is AI's Covenant with Babylon. Okay,
Nice.
and so he's taken that angle of the end time, and we're taking it along my chronology for the end time. So you don't get the whole story in one book. He thought he could do it that way. There's no way you can do it. There's too much information. So that's one thing that's going to be coming out next year, and all of the so many things in there, from the names to the locations and things, is all Google worthy. Believe me, you want to, even the name that we chose for Antichrist is a very
Nice.
interesting name. So look forward to that. I also have a curriculum that's going to be put out by the Deep End people with Taylor Welch. I was down there last week, and it's a 5-part prophecy curriculum. So if people are
Oh,
tired
cool.
of all the different versions of prophecy and the manipulation of prophecy, that's a good one. And I'll show you how I approach prophecy that takes the contradictions away and the confusion away. And so if people have an interest in that, look for that for coming out early in the new year as well, or hopefully before. And that's about really all that's on the table for me right now. I did do a show down in Dallas. I got to meet a lot of people in uh, about three weeks ago now. So
Yeah, you've been
um,
busy.
that,
You've been making it big now. I'm proud of you, man. You've been doing your thing. You deserve it.
well, I'm just doing the same thing I've done from day
Yeah.
one. So, and it's, but I think things are resonating more in terms of what we're seeing out
People
there.
need it
So,
now more than ever. They
yeah,
need this information now more than ever. They know they're looking for it, you
yep.
know. Yep, Gary, I really appreciate you coming on my show, and I'm looking forward to talking to you in a couple of weeks again. Everybody, the great Gary Wayne, Genesis6conspiracy.com. Thank you, buddy.